I want to talk about a subject and a topic of dealing with difficulties. We've all had our share of difficulties in our lives, whether it be the most recent or whether it be in distant past. But we all have our set of challenges and our set of difficulties that we face from time to time, and even maybe even day to day, and things we struggle with, things we have to overcome, things that we have to deal with. And we want to try to take a look at how we can be helped, how we can overcome some of these difficulties that we may face, whatever they may be. There's various things, of course, that we are going to deal with, and not everybody is going to deal with the same things. But looking at some general things that we can look at in even Scripture, as it points out, and how we can deal with these things. But first and foremost, life is to be enjoyed, is it not? Life is to be enjoyed. We have God, He's given us these things. He's given us this life to live upon this earth. We have the beauty that surrounds us. I've said before, as I've stood before you in lessons past, the idea of living in an area like this, in a region like this, where we have the beauty and the mountains and the four seasons and things of that nature is just absolutely gorgeous. And not to say, of course, the rest of the country that is flat is not gorgeous in its own right, but this area for me personally, and this region is just absolutely one of the prettiest regions in the country. And I've not been to all points of this country, but the mountains is what I love. And being able to enjoy the four seasons and the beauty that each season represents. But then knowing and realizing that God is behind it all. God is our creator and has given us all of these things to enjoy. Life is to be enjoyed. If we go about it and with these difficulties that we may face, if we go about it and that gets us down and brings us down all the time, how are we enjoying our life? How are we enjoying what God has given us if we're not dealing with and overcoming these difficulties? In the book of Psalms, in the book of Psalms 127, sometimes family may be a difficulty for us. Psalm 127, verses 3 and verse 5. Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord. The fruit of the womb is a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior, so are the children of one's youth. Happy is the man who has the quiver full of them. They shall not be ashamed, but shall speak with their enemies in the gate. Now, I said that sometimes family can be a difficulty, yes, but there's things that we can look at in our families, and this idea of our life that is to be enjoyed. Well, our children. Our children ought to be something that we enjoy in our life. And yes, again, it can be, dealing with family issues and family problems, from time to time may be a difficulty that we face. But it also can be things to enjoy. Acts chapter 14 and verse 17. Material blessings that we have in this life can be enjoyed and should be enjoyed. Acts chapter 14 and verse 17. And yet he left not himself without witness, in that he did good and gave you from heaven rains and fruitful seasons, filling your hearts with good and gladness, with food and gladness. Again, the idea of the four seasons that we have in this region, and there's other areas that have, the cycle of the four seasons comes around, but in a different sense, in different ways, it has its own right. But we are able to enjoy that. He gives us the rains, He gives us the fruits, He gives us the beauty around us. We're able to benefit and we're able to bring joy in our lives because of that. In Philippians chapter 4 and verse 1, relationships. Relationships in a broad spectrum sense, not just talking of husband and wife or children and parents and things of that nature, but relationships in a broader sense as we have a relationship with one another, our brothers and sisters, even in Christ. Philippians chapter 4 and verse 1, wherefore, my brethren, beloved and longed for, my joy and crown, so stand fast in the Lord, my beloved. Paul, making reference to the relationship that he had with these Philippian brethren. He longed for them to stand fast. He had a great relationship with them, and many others as well, as we know. But these are things that we can enjoy and things that we can have in our life that make it worthwhile, if you will. We don't need to be necessarily dealing with all the difficulties all the time, and that's what we get hung up on. That's what we dwell in. So what are some difficulties that we can look at and that we deal with from time to time? We can look at and have stress and anxiety in our lives. We all have, to some degree, some amount of stress that we deal with and anxiety issues from time to time. Ecclesiastes chapter 12 and verse 1, and also remember also thy Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come and your years draw nigh, when thou shalt say, I have no pleasure in them. We must remember. We must remember who we are. My mother, my father, particularly my mother, I think she knew that I wasn't the best example all the time. And as I was growing up and I would want to go out, I would want to, spend time with my friends. And I've mentioned this before here in other lessons, but as I would leave and go out the door, she would tell me, remember who you are. Remember who you are. First and foremost, you are a Christian. But I believe also part of that too was even in our name, our family. Remember who you are. So this passage or this verse in Ecclesiastes, giving us that admonition to remember who we are, even when we are dealing with these difficulties and whatever they may be. Remember who you are. Remember what you've been taught. Remember what you've learned, even as time in your youth. Job chapter 14 and verse 1. Job chapter 14 and verse 1. Man that is born of a woman is a few days and full of trouble. Our life is short. Our span is short, comparatively speaking. And it's full of trouble. It's full of sorrows. It's full of these difficulties that we face. A lot of times it's how we deal with them and how we overcome. Remembering who we are. Depression and despair, or heartache and sorrow, depression and despair. All things that we can deal with in our lives, and all things that will break us from time to time. All things that will put us to the point and bring us to that point where we break down, where we give in. But we must always guard against Satan, because that's exactly what he's trying to do. It's exactly what is being done and what he is desiring, that we break down, that we give in to the troubles, we give in to the sorrows and the difficulties. 2 Corinthians chapter 2 and verse 11, that no advantage may be gained over us by Satan, for we're not ignorant of his devices. What that's telling us is that there are many things that he uses in this life. Many things that he tries to take us down with. The sorrow, the troubles, the heartaches that we have in our lives. How are we going to deal with it? Satan is there just waiting for us to break. Waiting for that door to open that he can take the opportunity to break us even more. But we have to always take guard. We have to always be on guard, always learning, always striving to do what is right. That will help us to overcome. We can't ever give up. John and I having a conversation last night, and even a little bit in the Bible class this morning, talking about the idea of, no matter how old or how young you are, or how old or how new of a Christian that you may be, we can't ever stop. We can't ever say enough is enough, or that we've reached a point that, okay, I've learned enough, I'm good. I'm never going to fall back. We can't ever stop. And we always have to be on guard. I want to look at two things as well, in the physical and material difficulties and spiritual difficulties as we go through this lesson for the remainder of the time. We want to look a lot in the book of Job. We know, of course, the story of Job and how he was tested, how he was tempted of the devil, how God allowed him to be used or by the devil. And I'm going to be as bold to say as to prove a point to the old devil. God knew how Job would react. And Job was used to prove a point to the devil that there are those that are in this world that can overcome and not be or not given in and not break down with the hardships that they may face. We won't take time to read all of these passages, but from point to point, we may look at one or two. But we know of Job's situation in the story, the loss of property. He lost all that he had. And from what we understand and what we can infer from the story is that he had many lands and great lands, vast lands. The property, the structures that were lost. He lost it all. But what about his family? What about his family? We can, and we talk about, of course, and even with the most recent destruction through, the state of Kentucky with the tornadoes. I can't wrap my head around, and I've said before, other times as well, that, I enjoy weather and weather activities. But there were reports that were made of the tornado, or at least one of the tornadoes that went through the state of Kentucky, was on the ground for over 200 miles. A single tornado on the ground for over 200 miles. That's just incredible. You don't hear of that. It would be on the ground for a few miles, maybe 10, 15, 20 miles or something, and then it would dissipate and be gone. But over 200 miles. The loss of property, the destruction, the devastation that occurred, that can all be replaced. But the loss of lives, family, neighbors, brothers, sisters, fathers, mothers, daughters, sons, that can't be replaced. Job faced that hardship. We have faced that type of hardship as well in our lives. We've lost loved ones. and it's hard to deal with from time to time. Loss of our own health? Yeah, sure. We've had those difficulties in dealing with the pains and sufferings and ailments of the body. This physical body, it's not perfect. We've all had to deal with those types of things. Some, yes, I understand, to a larger degree and a more severe degree than others. I understand that. But how do we deal with it? How do we overcome? We'll look at that as we go on. Well, what about our loss of spirit? Job was facing, difficult times, and the pressure that he was facing, of course, from his wife, his family, his friends. Did he give in? No, he didn't. But there was a time, of course, that his hope was diminished to a point. And our hope sometimes becomes diminished, and we lose our spirit. We lose that drive or that momentum, if you will. Do we face these difficulties? Absolutely. As we've made mention, we talked about that just a moment ago. We've all faced these difficulties in some respect, in some way. But again, the question is raised, how do we deal with them? What type of reaction have we had? From Job there in chapter 13 and verse 15, he says, "Behold, he will slay me. I have no hope. Nevertheless, I will maintain my ways before him." There was a loss of hope. But no matter what, Job was going to continue to do as God willed and accept what was happening to him. Now, I hope that we never have to face things as severe as what Job has faced. And all of these things happening all at once, I hope that we don't have to face that type of situation. Yes, we've dealt with all of these things, but over the course of our lifetime, this was all at once happening to Job. But his stand, nevertheless, I will maintain my ways before him. Well, so what type of reaction would we have? Would we have a reaction of sinning not, or would we denounce God and curse him for what he was doing and what was happening to us? What is our reaction? Would we turn to alcohol or drugs, or would we turn to the bad influences in our life that once we had? I've been there. I've had those bad influences in my life, and it wasn't a good time. Would we turn back to that if these difficulties and these hardships that we were facing just became too much? The alcohol, the drugs, sexual pleasures, would we turn to those? Sports or work, those seem harmless enough. What's wrong with watching some sports, or we got to work, right? Well, if it becomes a point that it's driving you away further and further, driving you away from dealing with these difficulties and facing these difficulties that you are dealing with, and driving you away from God further and further, then that's a problem. That's a problem. Yes, we have to work. Yes, we have to provide for our families. We have to eat. But if it consumes us, are we really dealing with the difficulties? Are we really facing the challenges? that's before us if we're so consumed by these things? Have you cursed God because of things that have happened? Have we been angry at God? Maybe from time to time we are, but is that the right reaction? Have we cursed and denounced God? Are we angry with church members for things that we are facing and dealing with? If we are, we need to talk with those brethren. We're a family. We can work it out together. There's no need to be angry with other members of the congregation if you're facing and dealing with the challenges in your life. Unless, of course, it be maybe someone else's fault. But again, you need to work it out with them. You need to talk with them. There can't be anger within the family and the family still be able to function properly. Would we have rejoiced in this, as again, using the example of Job, but looking at our own lives in the challenges that we faced? Would we have rejoiced, or have we rejoiced? 2 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians chapter 12 and verse 7. And by reason of the exceeding greatness of the revelations, that I should not be exalted over much, there was given to me a thorn in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to buffet me, that I should not be exalted over much. Concerning this thing I besought the Lord thrice, that it might depart from me. And he saith unto me, My grace is sufficient for thee, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, I will rather glory in my weaknesses, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Even though that Paul, whatever this thorn in the flesh was, we don't know exactly. There's speculations and things of that nature, but we don't know exactly what he is referring to here. And he asked God for it to be removed. But no, you're going to have to deal with it. You're going to have to overcome. You're going to have to adapt. And what does Paul say? Most gladly, therefore, will I rather glory in my weaknesses, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Again, whatever this was, and it was challenging enough and agonizing enough to the point that he would ask God 3 times for it to be removed. But he's told no. And he rejoices in the answer that he was given. Of course, looking again at the example of Job, there in that chapter 13 and verse 15, nevertheless, I will maintain my ways. All of the hardships, all of the struggles that he faced all at once, he was still maintaining his glory to God and his duties and responsibilities. Knowing the Lord is with you. We never need to forget that. We always need to remember, even though that others may, that are in our life and others that are around us may seemingly be distant and be gone, God is always with us. The Lord is always with us. And do we accept the trial and challenges and difficulties as a strength builder? A test of faith in making us stronger? So that the next time that we're faced with a challenge, we're that much more stronger to overcome. Do we look at it that way, or do we just look at it as a heavy burden that gets us down every time? And do we look at it as a measure of God's confidence in ourselves? We're given the admonition that we are not going to be given more than what we can bear. There's always going to be that way of escape. So do we take confidence and do we take rejoicing or in rejoicing in this measure of God's confidence? Have you turned to God? Have you looked upon Him for that help, for that guidance, for that strength? I believe it's a testament to everyone here that we have, or we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't have an interest or a desire to assemble with God's children if we haven't at some point turned to Him and looked to Him for that strength and for that patience and to overcome these challenges. Job endured with that patience, and he was blessed. He was rewarded for it. We know how the story goes, of course. And Job, he abundantly was rewarded. Job chapter 42 and verse 12 and 13. So Jehovah blessed the latter end of Job more than his beginning. And he had 4,000 sheep and 6,000 camels and 1,000 yoke of oxen and 1,000 donkeys. He also had 7 sons and 3 daughters. So he was rewarded. He was given back more than what he had before, because he faced the challenges and he overcame. Yes, again, he may have lost that hope, but he never gave up on God. Never gave up on Him. James chapter 5 and verse 11. Job, even in the New Testament, being that good example, behold, we call them blessed that endured. You have heard of the patience of Job and have seen the end of the Lord, how that the Lord is full of pity and merciful. We too can overcome. We too can be rewarded greatly. When that time may come, of course, we don't know. But our reward is in heaven waiting for us. We're found faithful and remain faithful unto the end. Looking at the spiritual side of these difficulties, what is our reaction with these challenges, with these tests and trials that we may face? Well, skip the slide in there somewhere. Got my slides out of order. Sorry. Elijah. We have the example of Elijah. Elijah, he faced numerous spiritual challenges, did he not? We know the story, and we can read of his story. Looking at 1 Kings chapter 16, and verse 29 beginning, and in the 38th year of Asa the king of Judah, began Ahab the son of Omri to reign over Israel. And Ahab the son of Omri reigned over Israel and Samaria 22 years. And Ahab the son of Omri did that which was evil in the sight of Jehovah, above all that were before him. And it came to pass, as if it had been a light thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, that he took the wife of Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians, and went and served Baal and worshipped him. Well, this is the start of Elijah's troubles. We have here the idolatry that came back into the nation, came back into the country. And Elijah was dealing with this and having to face this challenge, this difficulty. Dropping down to chapter 18 in this book, same book, 1 Kings, chapter 18, verse 4. For it was so, when Jezebel cut off the prophets of Jehovah, that Obadiah took 100 prophets and hid them by 50 in a cave and fed them with bread and water. The upheaval that was occurring to God's people. We've talked about that in several lessons. Several have over the course of Bible classes and lessons given. The turmoil and the persecution that Christians would face, and that the amount of suffering that they would face in these times, like this, these biblical times. Thrown into lions' dens, thrown into arenas to fight the lions or whatever kind of beasts that there may have been, or other people, all for sport. And then, of course, just the outright murders and executions, beheadings, crucifixions. We can't imagine. We can't imagine the type of upheaval that it was. And here Elijah is having to deal with it during this reign of King Ahab. Dealing with an indifferent nation. Elijah came near unto all the people, dropping down to verse 21 of this same chapter 18. Elijah came near unto all the people and said, How long go ye limping between the two sides? If Jehovah be God, follow him. But if Baal, then follow him. And the people answered him not a word. How long are we going to try to be on both sides of good and evil? How long are we going to try to walk that fine line? It's not possible. We can't serve two masters. We can't live a double life of being pleasing unto the world, pleasing unto man, and pleasing unto God. And in this case of Elijah's time, in worshiping idols. You can't do it. It's not possible. It's not possible. Elijah put his trust into God as he faced the problems that he dealt with, and that he knew that God would provide and take care of him. Chapter 17 and verse 1, Elijah the Tishbite, who was of the sojourners of Gilead, said unto Ahab, As Jehovah, the God of Israel, liveth, before whom I stand, there shall not be dew nor rain these years, but according to my word. Elijah put his word on it. He was given, of course, the words and the instruction by God, but Elijah put his word on it, that it's not going to happen until I put my word on it once again, that it occurs. Knowing, of course, and trusting God with that issue and with that challenge. Do we trust God enough ourselves? Now, of course, we can't stop it from raining and things of that nature and stop the dews of the ground. But do we trust God enough in the challenges that we face, the difficulties that we face, that He will take care of us, that He will provide? The times of drought and the confrontation with the idolaters, as we alluded to there just a moment ago in verse 18, or chapter 18 rather. Well, we know what happened there on Mount Carmel with the prophets of Baal. The two altars were built, and the prophets of Baal, they cried out to him, and nothing happened, nothing occurred. Elijah prayed unto God, and the altars were consumed with fire. and the prophets of Baal were killed. Elijah had his trust in the Lord, that all things would be taken care of. We need to have our trust in the Lord. Yes, there's still work that we need to do and actions that we need to take. Yes, we cannot forget that. That's not what this lesson is designed and where it's designed to go. But there's work that we have to do, actions that we have to take. But we need to trust in the Lord that He will take care of us, and no matter what kind of difficulty that we are facing. Elijah fell into the deep depression. Again, it won't take time to read all of these passages, these verses. Fell into a deep depression. He got to the point where he was losing that hope and questioning. His life was threatened. Have we ever been in a situation where our own life has been threatened because we believe in God? I hope to goodness no, that it hasn't. Maybe it has for some. I don't know everybody's situation, but I hope to goodness that it hasn't come to that point. And he felt isolated, hopeless. We all face persecution, some type of persecution, some type of test and trial, the mocking of our friends or mocking from our friends, because we don't really truly say what they say and believe what they believe or wear what they wear, act like they act. And so they make fun of us. They ridicule. We've all faced that to some degree. The cursing of enemies. Yeah. We can surely think of times in our lives where that has become a problem or a difficulty that we've faced. Mistreatment by those in authority. Hopefully we've not come to that point in our lives where those that are in authority have mistreated us. We can, of course, look at our governmental state now, and we can have our own theories, we can have our own opinions and think so's. But knowing, of course, and remembering that God rules in the kingdom of men. God knows what He's doing in that situation. There can be mistreatment by authority for those who believe, those who are Christians. But how are we going to deal with it? How are we going to overcome? Are we going to, again, denounce God, curse Him? Are we going to lose that hope? Are we going to just give in to the mistreatment? Are we going to turn away from the Lord? Turn back to our old ways when it was, seemingly, anyway, so much easier? We can't give in to the pressure. We cannot give in and compromise when it comes to spiritual things. We need to rejoice. We need to rejoice, giving God the praise and glory, the honor that He deserves in all things. We have the example there in Acts chapter 5 of the apostles. And to him they agreed when they had called the apostles unto them that they had beat them and charged them not to speak in the name of Jesus and let them go. They therefore departed from the presence of the council, so downtrodden and so weary and heavy-hearted that they just left. No, that's not at all what they did. they departed from the presence of the council, rejoicing that they were counted worthy to suffer the dishonor of the name, or for the name, excuse me. They were rejoicing. They were happy that they received that mistreatment for the cause of the Lord. What would we do? What would we do? Would we continue to take the stand and rejoice in the glory of God? Elijah was given a work to do, just as we are given work to do as well. 1 Kings 19, verse 15, Jehovah said unto him, talking to Elijah, Go, return on thy way to the wilderness of Damascus, and when thou comest, thou shalt anoint Hazael to be king over Syria. And Jehu the son of Nimshi shalt thou anoint to be king over Israel, and Elisha the son of Shaphat and Abel Mahola that shalt anoint to be prophet in thy room. Goodness, can't get the words out, excuse me. Verse 17, and it shall come to pass that him that escapeth from the sword of Hazael shall Jehu slay, and him that escapeth from the sword of Jehu shall Elisha slay. Yet I will leave me 7,000 in Israel, and all the knees which have not bowed unto Baal, and every mouth which hath not kissed it. There was work to do, because there were still faithful followers out there. And that's what we have to remember too. We have to fight for ourselves. We have to believe for ourselves, but we have to fight for others as well. And we have to believe that there are others that are there with us. And they will help us overcome these challenges and these difficulties. Elijah was in, a time of sorrow and a time of hopelessness. But God reminded him, there's work to do, but there's also others out there that are just like you, Elijah. They're living for me. They have that hope, and they will help. And we need to know that there are those that will help us as well. And we need to understand and we need to believe that there are those that will help us with these difficulties in our life and these challenges. There are others that are faithful, and there's more work to do. Again, as we mentioned a few moments ago, we cannot give up. We cannot give up. There is not ever a point where enough is enough. And we need the confidence in Him, in Jesus, in God, to be able to do it. I'll leave you with this passage once again. Philippians chapter 4 and verse 8. I appreciate your attention, appreciate your listening to me. Hopefully it was of some good and you can take something with you. Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honorable, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, and if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things. Take this lesson with you. Again, hopefully it was of some benefit, that we can be together, that we can help one another, being that encouragement that we need to be to help those who may be facing any challenge in their own lives.